We have another Syracuse football recruiting update. Plus, later on, let's talk about some Syracuse basketball.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, I promised that we were going to talk about Syracuse basketball, and we were going to go over the wings for the 2025-26 season. So we're talking about the shooting guards and the small forwards as a position preview, just like we're doing for Syracuse football over the course of this offseason. And don't worry, we are going to talk Syracuse basketball and the shooting guards and the small forwards. But that's going to be segment 2 and segment 3 of this podcast. We are going to go over Syracuse football recruiting at the top of the show because we got an update with 4-star recruit CJ Hester. We're going to go over the latest with 5-star wide receiver Calvin Russell and also 3-star tight end Julius Miles, as well as offensive lineman Xavier Payne. All that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. Now, before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So let's start off the podcast with the big breaking news with Syracuse football recruiting. And I apologize, it's not super positive news, but it's also expected news. This is something that I thought and something that I foresaw happening, and it happened. CJ Hester, a 6'1", 185-pound, 4-star defensive back out of Cocoa, Florida. He announced his decision earlier this afternoon on Thursday, July 3rd, and he decided to go with the Florida Gators. CJ Hester chose Florida over Syracuse. Georgia tried to get in there late, and other schools as well. Iowa got a late visit with him. Again, this was predictable, so I did not have high expectations. I wasn't on pins and needles earlier today thinking, CJ Hester, he might choose Syracuse. Yes, Syracuse was in the race, but they were never the front runner to actually get him. Florida, for months and months and months, have been the favorite for CJ Hester. Now, listen, I'd imagine that Syracuse is not going to stop trying to recruit CJ Hester. After all, it seemed like he was always tending to lean Florida again, but he still did take an official visit with Syracuse, right? And he is a 4-star recruit. He is a defensive back. Well, Syracuse has flipped a Florida 4-star recruit before. They did that with Demetrius Samuel Jr. in the class of 2025. Not saying it's going to happen, but I would still monitor CJ Hester between now and signing day in early December. And I am bummed that Syracuse did not get him. But again, the expectations weren't really that high. Syracuse, it never really seemed like was in the driver's seat to go get him. But there's still 2 other players to talk about here on this podcast. And I think Syracuse has a better chance to at least land one of these guys than they did with CJ Hester. Let's talk about Calvin Russell again, shall we? 6'5", 190-pound wide receiver, a 5-star out of Miami, Florida. Michigan seems to be getting a lot of buzz recently. In fact, On3's Steven Wagner actually logged a Michigan prediction earlier today. Now, it's funny because Steven Wagner, I believe, is the same On3 insider that had LSU as his projected landing spot, but he decided to change that earlier today. With that said, it's what I said yesterday on the podcast with Calvin Russell. You can go pretty much everywhere and look up on the internet, and you can probably find another school that he could go to, if I'm being honest. Nobody really seems to have a clear read of what is going to happen when Calvin Russell announces his college decision on Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. In fact, On3 Steve Wiltfong said, I believe earlier today, that Syracuse has a slight edge, but he did not log a prediction into On3, and so therefore that's why Michigan appears to be the favorite over on On3. I believe they also have some buzz on Rivals as well. If I am being honest, if I am going to give you my opinion on Calvin Russell, where is he going to go? I think it's ultimately going to be Michigan or Syracuse. I really do. I think it's one of those two schools on Saturday. Would I be shocked if it's someone else, if it's Oregon or Florida State in his unofficial top four, or if it's someone beyond that? No. In fact, the only school I think I'd be genuinely shocked by, like genuinely shocked, is North Carolina, because he had a top 8 that is official. North Carolina was in that top 8, but I have heard nothing with North Carolina and Calvin Russell since that top 8. So therefore, they are the only school I look at and say, if he goes there on Saturday night, I would genuinely be surprised. I do think it's going to be Syracuse or Michigan, though, which I guess is good news for us Syracuse fans. So again, we're going to be on pins and needles on Saturday night, hoping that Syracuse can land the best recruit it's had in 20 plus years, give or take. Next up, you got Julius Miles, a 6'6", 210-pound, 3-star tight end from Freeport, Florida. Again, he is announcing his decision on Saturday, but I believe it's going to be a lot earlier than when Calvin Russell is set to announce. The top 3, like I said yesterday, Syracuse, Louisville, and Florida State. He has visited Syracuse and Louisville this summer. He's also a couple hours away from Florida State's campus. So even though 24/7 Sports doesn't say that he visited Florida State, it doesn't really matter. He's probably been there a bunch of times. So the favorite again, it appears to be Louisville. That being said, I would not be surprised if Syracuse did in fact land Julius Miles, but we'll just have to wait and see. So of the 3 players, it's the same 3 we talked about yesterday, right? CJ Hester is off the board, and predictably, he goes to Florida. So Calvin Russell still up in the air, Julius Miles still up in the air, and we also got a new update from Xavier Payne, a 3-star offensive lineman. He tweeted today, July 7th. What does that mean? I'm going to assume that's when he is announcing his college decision. For those that don't know, Xavier Payne is a former Florida State commit, but a few weeks ago, I believe, it was fairly recently, he decommitted from Florida State. The 2 schools that have been going after him are, well, this is a Syracuse show. I would not be bringing up Xavier Payne if Syracuse wasn't involved. It's Syracuse and Colorado. And it's anyone's guess. These are 2 elite recruiters going head-to-head against each other. You got Fran Brown at Syracuse. You got Deion Sanders at Colorado. I got my hands in the air if you're watching this if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, because I don't know. I haven't been able to get a read on it. I've been trying to, but it's either going to be Syracuse or Colorado, assuming that he's announcing on July 7th. So that's the latest with Syracuse football recruiting. In summary, CJ Hester picks Florida. It was predictable. Calvin Russell, there's a lot of buzz with Michigan. There's some buzz with Syracuse as well. It really seems like it's going to be those 2 schools. Julius Miles, anyone's guess, but he's got a top 3 with Syracuse in it. And Xavier Payne, it's Syracuse and Colorado. I am hoping that Syracuse, of those 4 players, now with CJ Hester off the board, I guess, but of the remaining 3, I hope that they can get 2. And if they only get 1, hopefully it's Calvin Russell. That's the hope, right? You might not be able to get everyone, but that's okay. If you can get Calvin Russell, I'm good. I'll sign up for that right now. So I think that concludes our Syracuse football recruiting update. Coming up, we'll shift gears. We'll shift sports. We'll talk some basketball. We'll go over the shooting guards and the small forwards, the starters and the backups for Syracuse. So stick with me here on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. So you might have a checking account, a savings account, a retirement account. You can combine them all in one with Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you may notice a slight change to the podcast, right? It's the background behind me. We do not have the football background on. We have the basketball background on because we're not talking about Syracuse football recruiting or Syracuse football position preview. We are going to go over some Syracuse basketball, and we are going to talk about the wing positions for this upcoming 2025-26 college basketball season. I almost said college football season. I said college basketball. I got it right. We're going to go over the shooting guards and the small forwards. And let's go over the two players that are likely to start for Syracuse basketball at the wing positions. At shooting guard, it's I shouldn't even say likely. It is all but a lock to be JJ Starling. And your small forward is projected to be Nate Kingz. The duo of Starling and Kingz. How do you all feel about it? Before I even give you my thoughts, I mean, how do you feel about that duo at the wing spots? Comment in the comment section below. To me, I think it's average to above average. I wouldn't go any more or less than that if I'm being honest with you all, which I am being honest with you all. JJ is the more known commodity. We have seen him in college basketball for 3 years. We've seen him with Syracuse basketball for 2 years, playing under head coach Adrian Autry. So we kind of have an idea of what we can expect from him. We know that he is a really good, but also a flawed player who we'll really dive into in just a moment. The wild card is Nate Kingz, in my opinion, and we'll get to that also in just a second here. Neither of them project to be the greatest defenders, but the hope is that they can make up for it with their scoring prowess. So, having said that, let's get into JJ Starling, a 6'4", 200-pound senior. Last season, he averaged a career-high 18 points per game. I actually believe the exact number was 17.8, but we round up and we round down here on this podcast just to make everyone's lives easier. JJ Starling averaged about 18 points per game, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 41% from the field, and only 27% from the three-point line. And he, by far, led Syracuse in shot attempts a year ago with over 16 per game. What I like about JJ Starling for this upcoming season is that I think his role will be slightly reduced from what it was a year ago. JJ, he's fast, he's athletic, he excels at getting to the basket. Unfortunately, when he gets to the basket and he gets fouled, he's not the greatest free throw shooter at less than 70% for his career. Last season, though, despite all the good stuff I said about him and also his scoring, he can score a lot of points, obviously nearly 18 a game last year. But it was also his most inefficient year in college basketball, which on the surface would seem surprising. It was his third year in college basketball. You would think that at minimum, he would be more efficient than what he was as a true freshman, but that was simply not the case. But I believe it's more because there was too much of a scoring load that was placed on JJ Starling. Because think about last season. If JJ Starling wasn't scoring, who else was going to score? Especially when Donnie Freeman was out for I don't know if it was over, but he was out for about half the year. So Donnie Freeman's out for about half the year. That's your second leading scorer. If it's not JJ, then who's your threat? I guess Eddie Lampkin, maybe a little Jair Davis, but that's not enough. That's not enough around JJ Starling. Now, you look at his supporting cast, he's got Nate George at point guard, Nate Kingz, who we'll talk about in just a second here, Donnie, hopefully for a full season. He's got better players around him now, which means he might not have to do as much. He might not have to shoot 16 shot attempts per game. It might coincide with less scoring. He might not average 18 a game next year, but I'll take a year of him scoring 15 points per game. Hopefully isn't awful on defense, and he's a lot more efficient. So maybe he shoots like what he did in 2024, where he was around 45% from the field and 32% from the three-point line. Another reason why his efficiency was low last season is because he took too many threes. He took about 5.5 three-point attempts per game, and he only shot about 27% from the three-point line. That's going to lower your field goal percentage overall. JJ Starling is best when he is going downhill and he is attacking the basket. And so next year, hopefully, he's not asked to shoot a ton of threes, which leads me to the next player that we're going to talk about, which is Nate Kingz, a 6'5", 190-pound redshirt senior. He transferred from Oregon State this offseason, and last year, played in 31 games. He started in all 31 games. He averaged 12 points a game, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 50% from the field, and nearly 45% from the three-point line. If you've been following along this podcast long enough, you probably know what I am about to say about Nate Kingz. 3 words. He can shoot. That's what Nate Kingz is being brought to Syracuse to do, to shoot the basketball at a high level. Not JJ Starling this time around. We don't want JJ taking 5.5 three-point attempts per game. We want Nate Kingz doing that. Last year, Nate Kingz, he shot over 4 three-point attempts per game. So I think it is perfectly reasonable to expect that he could do something similar again to this upcoming season. I don't know if he'll shoot 45% from the three-point line, but at minimum, 40% from the three-point line on 4 to 5 three-point attempts per game, maybe even more of that, to be honest with you. It's not like beyond Nate Kingz, there are other elite shooters on Syracuse basketball. They are relying on him to provide a lot of floor spacing and shooting. The hope is that he's essentially what Chris Bell was supposed to be for Syracuse basketball last year with shooting. Chris Bell just started the year horribly. He kind of started to bounce back as the year went on, but even then, he could not necessarily really make up for that really bad start that he had. And also, hopefully, Nate Kingz is a better defender than what Chris Bell was, right? Having said that, last year, Syracuse was not a good outside shooting team, 33% from three-point land last year. That was 12th in the ACC. They did have 3 players shoot 40% or better. Those 3 players were Jair Davis, Peter Mastorovich, and Eddie Lampkin. I know, pause for laughter. There's a caveat here, which is that trio that I just mentioned, that all shot over 40% from the three-point line, the caveat is it was on less than 2 attempts per game combined. So those were guys that really, you could kind of say, just got lucky because they didn't take a lot, and of the limited attempts, they just happened to make them. Nate Kingz is supposed to be a high-volume three-point shooter that not only is going to be high volume, but also highly efficient. So overall, it's like I said at the very top with my main takeaway when I look at JJ Starling and Nate Kingz, which is that it is an average to above average starting wing unit, in my opinion, in the ACC. JJ Starling is the known commodity. We know what he can do. We know what he's not as good at. With Nate Kingz, he's a little bit more of an X factor. How is he going to be in his first season in the ACC? I understand that he played at Oregon State. I understand that he played against pretty good competition, but it's not elite of the elite competition. I don't think his conference is better than the ACC. So we'll find out. But my expectation is that this will be a capable duo in the ACC next year. And I love your thoughts on it. So comment in the comment section below. Do you think this is an average unit, above average, maybe below average? What do you think the strengths are? What do you think the weaknesses are? Comment in the comment section below, because coming up, we'll talk about some of the key backups at the wing spot for Syracuse basketball next year. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and we still got plenty more to talk about here on today's show. We are about to discuss the key backups, the key reserves at the shooting guard and small forward position for Syracuse basketball in 2025-2026. But before we do so, shout out to all those and thank you for continuing to like and subscribe to Locked On Syracuse each and every day. You all are truly the best. And hey, if you haven't done so already and you've already made it this far in the podcast, if you can just do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Now, let's step back to the actual content portion of this podcast. And I've said this before, but if Syracuse is going to make the NCAA tournament, which as of now, I'm not projecting them to make the NCAA tournament. Feel free to agree or disagree in the comments section below. Again, I'm a Syracuse fan. I'm a Syracuse alum. I want them to go undefeated and win the national championship. But I also have to try to be somewhat objective, right? And just give you my honest takeaways and my honest thoughts. I don't think they're a tournament team right now. The way they can make the tournament, though, is that they're going to need some of their depth to really come through. Because my read on this Syracuse basketball team for this upcoming season, and trust me, we're going to tie it into the wing spots in just a second here, is that they could very much be like the 2024 Syracuse basketball team. A competitive team, a team that won 20 games in the regular season. They got some good top-end talent, like a Judah Mintz was there, Malik Brown was there, Chris Bell was one of the elite shooters in the ACC that year, and JJ Starling was on that team. He's the one holdover. That will be on this year's roster of that four that I mentioned. It could be like that. But the issue with 2024, they had nobody beyond those four players. They didn't. They were not good enough beyond those four personnel-wise to make the NCAA tournament. And that's what happens when you have good high-end talent, but not elite high-end talent with no depth. Competitive team, but just not quite an NCAA tournament team. What does that mean? Syracuse basketball for this upcoming season, they're going to need a couple of guys to break out. And we've talked about it on the podcast before, and now we can tie it into the wing position here. Two of those key breakout candidates are at shooting guard and small forward. The first one is the shooting guard. Kiyan Anthony, 6'5", 185 pounds. You might have heard of Kiyan Anthony. He is a consensus high-end 4-star recruit out of New York. But that's not why you probably know him. It's because he is the son of former Syracuse great Carmelo Anthony, who led Syracuse to its only national title in 2003. Back to Kiyan specifically, though, he is known as one of the better pure scorers in the class of 2025, and he's probably not going to be asked to start right away. But I think one of the best case scenarios of this team for next year is that Kiyan Anthony starts to force the coaching staff's hand a little bit. They almost make it so that they have to play him in the starting lineup. Ideally, Nate Kingz is doing his thing at small forward. JJ Starling, I don't think is going to come out of the starting lineup no matter what. It would take an incredibly long stretch of bad basketball in order for him to come out, which means that Nate Kingz is the only one of the two that could come out barring injury. The hope is that Nate Kingz is playing well, but Kiyan Anthony is doing so well off the bench that they have to give him more minutes. And so maybe they have to move the starting lineup around because they need to get Kiyan Anthony on the floor more. And also, I'm not necessarily worried about playing him at small forward rather than shooting guard. And part of the reason is because he's the same size as Nate Kingz. So basically what I'm saying is that if you're concerned about Nate Kingz being in the starting lineup at only about 6'5", less than 200 pounds, fine, I get it. It's the same deal also with Kiyan Anthony. They could both be a little bit undersized for a small forward in high major Division I basketball. But having said that, that's the best case scenario. Kiyan Anthony starts to force this team's hand and make him play in the starting lineup this upcoming season, because that would mean that this team has a lot more depth. It would really lengthen out the lineup if he could break out. And then you got Tyler Betsey, 6'8", 225-pound sophomore, a small forward. He transferred from Cincinnati this offseason. He was a former top 50 overall recruit in the class of 2024, but last year, he did not necessarily live up to that hype. If I'm being completely honest with you, he played in 34 games, which is nice, but he only averaged about 3 points a game, 2 rebounds per game, and he was known as a good shooter in high school, but that did not translate to his first season in college basketball. Shot less than 32% from the three-point line and less than 30% in Big 12 play a year ago. The hope is that Tyler Betsey can improve on those percentages. He can maybe shoot 35% from the three-point line next year, because that would provide the team a little bit more shooting, because they don't necessarily have a lot of shooting beyond Nate Kingz. With a guy like Tyler Betsey next year, a reasonable expectation would be, hey man, 3 attempts per game from the three-point line and shoot 35%. That's a respectable three-point percentage. It's not asking Tyler Betsey too much from him. The dream is that he breaks out completely and just explodes, right? That's obviously the dream of the guy like Tyler Betsey. He's a former top 50 overall recruit. Maybe he just takes a big sophomore leap forward. We saw Chris Bell do that, actually. I mean, when you compare his numbers as a true freshman to what he was as a true sophomore, he took a big jump. Same with Malik Brown, same with Quadir Copeland with Syracuse a few years ago. Actually, beyond those 4 that I mentioned, Quadir Copeland was the 5th guy. So I apologize on that from either last segment, from earlier this segment, I should say. So finally, there's also a 3-star true freshman in Aaron Womack. And there's also Montana State transfer Bryce Zephyr. I've had multiple recruiting experts tell me about Aaron Womack. I like the prospect. I think that he is a developmental piece based on what I have been told about him. This is someone that hopefully this season goes really well. He stays on the team, decides not to enter the transfer portal, and that Syracuse develops him over the course of this season, and he could be a contributor in 2026 and 2027. Bryce Zephyr, we had a mini podcast talking about him. A lot of you all were maybe freaking out a little because he's coming from Montana State, and he wasn't particularly good at Montana State. But I've said this before. He's someone that fills out the roster. You have 15 open scholarships. You need bodies on the team, to be frank with you all. This is someone that Syracuse could go up against in practice as a Division I basketball player. He's someone that could play in garbage time, give him fouls when needed. That's really all that's going to be asked of Bryce Zephyr this upcoming season. If he's asked to do anything more than that, I would be concerned. But if not, I'm not too worried about Bryce Zephyr. So overall, between the starters and the backups at the wing spots for Syracuse this upcoming season, I think this unit is about average with the potential to be more or less than that. Again, JJ Starling is the proven, known commodity. We know what he is about. Beyond that, question marks. Could Nate Kingz be really good? Absolutely. Could he also fall flat in his 1 year at Syracuse? That is on the table. How will guys like Kiyan Anthony and Tyler Betsey do with Syracuse this upcoming season? That's up in the air, but those are the 3 players that are really going to round out and determine whether or not this is going to be a strength for Syracuse or a weakness for Syracuse this upcoming season. And I'd love your thoughts on it in the comments section below right now. Your thoughts on Syracuse's shooting guards and small forwards for this upcoming year. And do you think Syracuse could make the NCAA tournament next season? Comment in the comments section below. As far as what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the future, tomorrow we got Poll Friday. We are going to talk about Syracuse basketball again and how they are going to do against Houston and Kansas in Vegas this upcoming year. On Saturday, probably no podcast. Never say never. But as of right now, with my schedule and the timing, Calvin Russell picking to saying that he wants to commit at 9 p.m. Eastern, I saw that and said, that is not good with my schedule. But we'll see what happens. Maybe I will be able to get a podcast up there on Saturday. But if not, don't worry. Whether Syracuse gets Calvin Russell, whether they get Julius Miles or not, we are going to talk and debrief about Syracuse football recruiting on Sunday. All right, so that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. And thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith, who's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. And you can be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and I will see you all again soon.